I'm Sasha.
I'm Curtis.
And we are Two Angry Men from Asolo Rep's upcoming production of 12 Angry Men, a new musical.
We're taking you inside the jury room to witness the process of creating this exciting new adaptation of an American classic.
This is Two Angry Men.
In this episode, we chat with 12 Angry Men's book writer, David Simpatico, and composer and lyricist, Michael Holland.
So a lot of people wonder, 12 Angry Men, why, how? We're also wondering, can you tell us about the initial conception of this project?
Yeah, we were approached separately, actually, about the idea of musicalizing this classic, and I thought it's such an unlikely, counterintuitive thing. That's what drew me into it. And then the folks who had the idea were looking for a book writer who was, I guess, foolhardy enough to take on this kind of project, and they found one.
And did you guys know each other beforehand?
No, I was familiar with his work. He was also familiar with his work, but I was not. And so I was really actually excited that his name popped up.
David, did you know him?
No, but I was within 30 seconds of meeting each other. We were finishing each other's sentences at the lunch. And these guys were like, oh, you're putting us on. You got to put in a breath. And we were like, okay. And when they asked me do you want to do 12 Angry Men, it was like a great favorite movie of mine and my family. I didn't really even think about it because it's life and death, right? So life and death, I'm like, that's drama. And it's a great script. So sure. And I just kept thinking, why are they coming to me? I mean, they must have a list of people who said no. I said yes.
So can you talk a little bit about how that initial adaptation took place of taking something so iconic that has no music and starting to bring music into it as well as new text?
You know, it's interesting. I like to hear music in unlikely places. That's kind of a thing. And it's not on purpose. It's just the way I operate. If you tell me the story of, that you want to musicalize, and I know here's where the I Want song goes, and here's where this goes, I'm less interested. But something that's tougher to crack, I like. And I had this thought that it should be sort of this muscular 50s kind of club jazz. And you had the same idea. David was sending me all this stuff I'd never heard before, really sort of, some of it pretty alarming, but great and really inspiring. David kind of went through the script and said, what do we think about songs here? We had a discussion. I mean, we had a conversation from the get-go. I think when we got out of that first lunch walking down the street, we were already talking about how to approach it. Yeah. And we weren't even sure that we were going to be doing it.
We were originally supposed to share lyrics.
Oh, that's right.
Right. And then I remember, and we had done dramaturgical work, and we were sharing back and forth what's musical, what's not, what's a sequence, what's not, and then, oh yes, how about this? I sent him a bunch of lyrics, and he said the same thing in lyrics, and he goes, I really need, he needs to write his music and his lyrics at the same time, in the same voice, and I was like, well, they're so much better than mine. You do it, and I'll do the book. Okay. And I thought it was great.
But it was all coming out of what David had sent to me. David took a month with, if I remember, with the script, right? And sent a draft, and I think this song is here. I mean, the whole idea of a song called Hottest Day of the Year is his idea. I didn't walk in and go, but Eureka, the vision. But I ran with that.
People always say that when they can't speak anymore, that they sing. But in this play in particular, with both the music and with the book, it goes from when the singing reaches a climax, then the speech comes out of that.
Yeah.
Now, how do you integrate with having a story as iconic in Americana as 12 Angry Men is, of infusing new lyrics or new sentences into that with the book, and then also making sure that is integrated into the music so effortlessly?
Writing musicals for dummies, the idea is to explode the material, right? To make it musical. And does that mean what? Do we zoom to the wives at home and go into their lives? Do we get into a lot of backstory? And that seems to betray the source material. There's nothing wrong with this play. A lot of times a musical adaptation works because the material that it's taken from, it didn't quite get there. This is a classic. So the idea of, reinventing it was never on the table. It was more sort of, how do we invigorate this? I've always said, if you're listening closely enough, the piece will tell you what it wants to be. And that's how we sort of discovered that, yes, it ramps up so much we have to sing, but now it's ramped so much we have to speak, and it's going to keep trading off, and it becomes this hybrid kind of piece. But that was not necessarily the blueprint that we started with, right? I mean,
well, we wrote it, the first draft, in 3 months?
3 months.
3 months.
Okay.
That's a lot of material.
Yeah.
And the goal was I didn't want to get in the way of this piece. I just want to open a few windows. And so when we got to the first draft, the original people didn't get it. So it went into a drawer for 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, and the time, we were just waiting for its time.
So then, speaking of that time, how did it get taken out of the drawer?
Well, it's a weird thing because, okay, so I'm not going to get all mystical and weird, but I get these things, and they're not even premonitions, but when they happen, I listen. And I was in Minneapolis at Theater Latte working on another piece, and it was when they had just gotten their new home at the Ritz Theater. And I was getting a tour of the theater, and I walked out into the house, and it was like a voice in my head said, 12 Angry Men's gonna happen here. It had been sitting in a drawer for a number of years. And I emailed David that night, and I said, you're not gonna believe this. I was just in the place where 12 Angry Men's gonna happen, and he wrote back, yeah, right. And because we hadn't spoken in a couple of years either. We didn't have a feud or anything, we just had nothing to talk about. No one in Minneapolis knew about this play yet. But over the course of working with the theater and getting to know Peter better, things just come up in conversation. So we'd written our first draft in 2012 and never touched it since. And I was having a quick bite with Peter, and he said, tell me about this 12 Angry Men piece. And so I sort of gave him the spiel as I could remember it. He said, send it in to Alyssa Adams, who then contacted the liaison to the Reginald Rose estate and said, we have this piece that we'd like to look at. And the fellow said, well, there was interest in this some years ago, but it doesn't seem a very likely prospect, and no one's really interested in pursuing it. And Alyssa has this way, and she said, I think you should give this a listen. And they did, and by the next morning we had the rights for a provisional production, meaning we could do the world premiere, and folks could come from the estate and during the first song could stand up and say nope, but luckily it didn't turn out that way. But that's the roundabout way that it's sort of.
It was literally overnight that we got the rights.
But the weird thing is, we knew when we wrote it that this was going to have a life. You just didn't know when, but you just know these things, and it just felt. I've got a lot of stuff in the drawer no one's ever going to hear, for better or worse. But and as we both do.
Never once did I doubt that this would have a wonderful life, and it was worth sharing.
I think we could even say when we first did it in rehearsals, we were all just looking around the room. I think when we initially got the band in, and we were looking around to each other saying, this is just more than a regional production. This is going to have legs that are going to be quite long and quite deep.
Yeah.
I hope so.